So I like simple moves. As much as I like being a move monkey, I also thoroughly love simple mechanics as well. Because as much as I like to tinker around with different mechanics and difficult moves and whatnot, I also love to reduce and refine very simple mechanics for moves and routines and all of that stuff. So let's just take, for example, something that's relatively simple, a relatively simple concept. So how do you execute a certain action like a shuffle, a cut, right? And then somehow just place the deck off to the side, and when you're ready, just go back to the deck, execute a real cut, and then find your way back to the desired location in the deck, right? It seems to be a very complicated sort of scenario, but it's actually simpler than you actually expect. So we'll discuss basically 4 different methods of bookmarking where you need to cut the deck. And so that means basically you can set aside the deck, you can sort of avoid touching it, and then when you want to go back to it, you can reach in, cut where you need to, and then still find your way back to, for example, the 4 aces or wherever that you want. And these are all known under the name of to indicate the location for the cut, which is just a dedicated chapter in SW Erdnäs's The Expert at the Card Table. But again, do keep in mind that I am looking at these moves through a magician's lens. Whereas in the book sort of, Erdnäs himself sort of sees these moves through a sort of card sheet's perspective. So there might be some changes here and there for handling, but generally these should all be the same concept of just bookmarking a deck using a very specific method and then finding your way back to that specific location. So I do have to preface this video by sort of saying that all the techniques that I'm going to be explaining and describing come from The Expert at the Card Table back in 1902 by S.W. Erdnäs. But the thing is, all of these concepts have been basically published and sort of described in publications for far longer than S.W. Erdnäs has even been around. These concepts include the bridge crimp and of course the jog. So again, both of these concepts have been used by gamblers and card cheats for far longer than even published sort of magic history or card history in general. So just an example, let's take for example a very popular move that I taught that sort of uses the jog shuffle. That is actually a very old move, as I described in the video, in that video for the history section. The oldest known publication for the jog shuffle actually dates back to 1584. So nearly, basically 350 years before Erdnäs, in a book called The Discovery of Witchcraft by Reginald Scott. So again, that's just the concept of a jog shuffle. Imagine the concept of a jog itself. Probably a lot older. Or even just the concept of crimping, just putting a bend in a card. The concept of a corner crimp actually comes from, or at least the oldest publication of a corner crimp actually comes from an anonymous author back in around 1552. So again, 250 years, 400 years of history before Erdnäs. So again, do keep in mind that this is just publication dates. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't say anything about when these concepts were actually first used, when they were actually first sort of created, because again, why would gamblers or card cheats even sort of publicize their techniques? Because they use these techniques to gain money, they use these techniques to sort of cheat at cards and then take your money. So it stands to reason that these concepts have been have existed way before just the publication dates, have been around before the 1500s. So even though, again, these techniques, these moves come from Erdnäs, I'm going to be describing the Erdnäs techniques. These concepts actually predate Erdnäs by quite a lot. And so, yeah, these are far older. So that's the general history behind these moves. And so even though these moves come from the 1500s, chances are they might come from maybe the 1300s when playing cards were actually first introduced in Europe. So method one is going to involve an overhand shuffle, a jog, and then a bridge crimp. So this is going to be primarily used to keep track of the bottom few cards, the bottom stock. So let's just, for example, the 4 aces, like so. Okay, so it's going to start off with a normal overhand shuffle, but it's going to be slightly modified. So then it's going to resemble a jog shuffle. So your left pinky is actually going to be at the back over here, and then it's going to be flattened out like so. So then it exposes the pad of the left pinky over here. So we're going to start off with a normal overhand shuffle. And when you have about half of the cards shuffled off, what you're going to do is that you're actually just going to move your right hand backwards slightly, and then you're just going to toss the rest of the cards on top of the shuffled off deck. So then this actually creates an in jog, which the pad of your pinky is actually keeping track of. So no matter what you do, because the pinky is actually keeping track of the bottom card over here, you basically have the in jog anchored into place, which is why the pinky is so important, right? It anchors everything down in place, even though the top few cards are messy. But of course the pinky is over there. Next, your right hand actually comes over and places the deck in a bill grip. But as it does so, your right thumb actually lifts up on this in jog. So it lifts up on the bottom ace like so. It's going to kick it in, and then you're going to go into basically a bill grip with a thumb break. So it's actually just going to lift up on this ace, and then it's just going to kick in as it goes into a bill grip like so. Okay, so it's just a lift and then a push in, just like so. Your left hand then actually regrips underneath into a dealer's grip, but it's actually going to be modified. So you actually take a look at the dealer's grip underneath. What you have is that instead of your index being on the front short edge of the deck, of the bond packet, it's actually going to join the other fingers on the rightmost long edge over here. And this is what's going to happen underneath the cover of the right hand, okay? So underneath the cover with still the separation between both packets, you're actually just going to squeeze these fingers down onto this packet against the fat of the thumb. And what it does is that it actually just buckles this packet downwards into a U shape, like so. So you're just going to squeeze it downwards as your right hand, as the top packet is actually hiding everything underneath. So it's just going to put in a bridge crimp, like so. And then you can then put it off to the side, just like so. But because of the bridge crimp that you put into the deck, what you have is this actually separation between both packets. Of course, this deck is slightly warped, so it's a bit harder to keep track of. But if you put in more work into it, you should get something that's a bit more similar to this. So now you have an upside down, you have a U shape, and then you have a normal flat packet over here. So then you could just pick up the deck, place it off to the side, and then it just seems like you just did an overhand shuffle, you squared everything up, and then you placed it off to the side. So that's what it should look like. But realistically, you actually put in a bridge crimp over here. All right. But when you're actually ready to just cut and get back your bottom stock, your right hand is actually just going to reach over. Your middle and your thumb is actually going to reach to the top to about where the bend is. So then it can actually feel out where this gap is, because of this U shape, there should be a gap that's formed around the center. So my middle finger and my thumb can just lift up on this packet, and whenever it wants to, it can just cut forward, and then you have your bottom stock back in place. Okay, so even though you have a deck shuffled, right? Because of the fact that you have an in jog, you kick this in jog in, and then you put in the bridge crimp, right, underneath of the cover, and you can just place it off to the side. Because you have that, you can just lift up on it, cut, and then you have the bottom stock back in place. So having this bridge crimp just means that you're bookmarking the deck after an overhand shuffle. So you can just place it off to the side, and then you're all good. So of course, that's just one method of keeping track of the bottom stock, and it's very effective because, again, you're having a crimp in the deck, so you can just set it off to the side. And that is the first method. Erdnase also mentions that you can bend the bottom packet in an upside down U shape. So if you do the exact same thing, so if you do an overhand shuffle, keep your pinky there, in jog everything, thumb break, lift up on this in jog, create a thumb break, go over, and then if you actually just bend this packet sort of the other way around, like so. So if your index just slightly just kicks this packet upwards, it just buckles it the other way around, like so, okay? So your index just basically flans out, and this causes this packet to bend the other way instead of bending downwards into a U shape, okay? But if it bends downwards like so, what's gonna happen is it's actually gonna change the dynamic of the crimp. So now, instead of being crimped down the center, it's actually gonna be crimped down the sides, like so. So when you set it down, you're not going to cut with your, it's going to change how you actually cut deck because of the crimp. But notice how, because it's actually now rocking on top of this upside down U shape, what I have to do now is actually set it down sort of lengthwise like so. And then my middle ring and pinky finger is actually going to contact the long edge that's actually furthest away from me. And what this does is that this actually rocks this packet sort of upwards like so towards me. So then this just opens up towards me, right? It opens up towards me and widens up the gap on my side. So because it's a U shape, it just rocks back like that. Okay, that's the best visualization I can give. So now that you have that, your right thumb reaches over and it can easily pick up on this widened gap. So again, it just pushes down, your right thumb reaches over and then picks it up from that side. So kicks downwards like so, and then thumb picks it up from there. You can pick it up from the aces, and then you can just cut forward like so. And of course that preserves the bottom stock. So that is just another way to do the bridge crimp, as Erdnase has mentioned in the book. So method 2 is going to be using an overhand shuffle and a side jog, and this one is going to be keeping the bottom stock as well. So for this one, you're going to want to change your overhand shuffle grip. So rather than it being pretty high up in the palm of your hand, like so, it's actually going to be a bit deeper into the palm of your hand, so then you're exposing the pads of your middle ring and pinky finger, okay? Now, you're obviously just going to do a normal overhand shuffle, so go do your normal overhand shuffle as per usual. But when you reach the halfway point, that's when it's going to be slightly different, because now again you're exposing the pads of your middle ring and pinky finger. So what it's going to do now is that these fingers rather, are going to extend. So when you toss this packet on, these fingers are actually going to contact this bottom card over here. It's going to contact this bottom card, and because of friction, it's just going to slide out like so, right? So it's just going to contact, and then the rest of the deck is just going to slide forward while leaving the bottom few cards sort of smeared like so, okay? Which basically just creates a side jog, okay? But of course, the more intense the more that you toss high, the more that this side jog is going to be exaggerated. Okay, so if I toss my side jog, so if my fingers contact the bottom card sort of at the halfway point, this card is going to be sticking out about halfway through. But if my fingers actually contact it closer to the rightmost edge, it's just going to stick out just a slight bit. Okay, so you don't want to toss it on too early, or else you're just going to have like this huge card sticking out. So you want to contact it when it's about closer to like here. So then only a bit sticks out, like so, okay? So just from pure friction, this card sticks out, but immediately afterwards, the right hand is actually going to come over, right? It's going to grip everything in a bill grip, and it's actually going to hide this side jog over here. So this bill grip is going to be slightly slanted towards the right, just to hide this side jog over here, okay? And as you actually set down this deck, your right hand can actually just slightly just smear this card, the top few cards over here, just to hide the side jog. Because if we actually take a look, my side jog is still over here. But if I just set it down like so, they can clear as day see this side jog over here. And I don't want that. So I want to set it down here and just slightly bevel the deck, which will hide this side jog over here. But it's just the top few cards that are smeared off to the side, so then it'll hide the side jog. Otherwise, it'll remain undisturbed over here. So this is just for cover, okay? And when you're ready, all right, when you're ready, your left hand can just reach over, right? It can reach over, it can pick up on this side jog. So it's just gonna lift up, and then it's just gonna push in on this card. So then you're lifting up on the aces, and then you could cut forward, like so. And then you have all four aces back on the bottom of the deck, okay? So that is method 2 of the Erdnase to indicate the location for the cut. Now, if you know me and you know you've seen my content long enough, you know that I hate grip changes, which is why I don't necessarily like method 2. But you can refine it with an idea from Paul Leopold called A Natural Jog Control. Info card is up there. So you're going to be using a normal overhand shuffle grip, but the moment when you shuffled off about half the cards and you need to get into that side jog, rather than using the pads of your left fingers to get that side jog, you're going to use the principle that you learned from A Natural Jog Control. So that principle, I'm just going to briefly go over it, is that if you actually just tilt your hand just slightly, it's actually going to cause the cards to smear as you drop these cards, right? But you're basically just going to do that from overhand shuffle position. The problem with that is that if you just just tilt the packet midway through, that's really weird, and you don't really want that. So what we're going to do is that rather than tilting the left hand, you're actually just going to tilt your right hand. So pretend that I'm just shuffling here, but as I'm tossing this packet over here, I'm actually just going to angle this packet downwards like so. I'm going to angle this packet downwards, so then when it actually hits this packet, it's just going to smear this packet, and it's going to have the same exact effect as if I've tilted this left hand, but the only difference is that I've just tilted my right hand, okay? And that's a lot more subtle than just randomly tilting my left hand. So I'm just going to tilt my right hand downwards, this packet downwards, so then it hits this packet and then slides over here. Of course, it's going to be slightly more difficult because of the angle that I'm trying to do this on, but it will work. So again, shuffle, 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 and when I'm ready, tilt it downwards, toss everything. I got my side jog, my right hand comes over, places the deck down on the table, bevels the deck, so then it hides the side jog. When I'm ready, my left hand comes over, lifts up on that side jog, cuts at it, so then I have my right hand, so then I have my aces, cut forward, and then everything is back in order. Okay, so that's just a different sort of handling on method 2, but it's one that I much prefer because you don't have to change the grip in for your overhand shuffle, right? You don't have to change it, so then you're exposing these pads more, right? So yeah, I much prefer this, and it's using, of course, an idea from Paul LaPaul. So I'm just going to change the angle real quickly, the camera angle for method 3, because it's actually going to rely on the edge of the table, because method 3 uses a bridge crimp and the context of a riffle shuffle. Now I do want to clarify, this is table work, so this isn't going to be for an in the hands riffle shuffle. This is actually going to be for a tabled riffle shuffle, okay? So why did I specifically mention the context of a riffle shuffle? Because this sort of occurs outside of a normal riffle shuffle. So usually, because of the handling of a riffle shuffle, right, you're actually gonna have a slight bend into the deck, right? So for card games, that's not necessarily ideal, which is why sometimes the dealer will actually take the deck and will actually just give the deck a quick sort of bend to cancel out the bend that you get from a riffle shuffle, right? But this also gives you the proper sort of context surrounding the move, right? So what you're going to do is that you're actually going to pick up the deck, and the deck hovers over the table edge. Now you're actually going to cut off the top packet forward with your left hand, and as you do so, this is actually going to give cover for the packet. So this after you're done your riffle shuffle. You're going to pick up the deck to bend it, right? Just to quickly unbend the deck, and then you're going to do your forward cut with your left hand. And as you cut forward, what you're going to do now is that this gives cover for your right hand and its right thumb to actually just apply a bit of pressure downwards. It's going to apply a bit of pressure downwards, and it's actually going to bend this deck over the table edge, right? So then you don't need a lot of force to actually bend this packet. It's just going to bend around of the tabled edge, and it's going to put in this same upside down U shape, okay? It's going to put in this same upside down U shape. So then by the time that this deck hits board, you can then complete the cut, and then you have this bridge crimp over here, okay? So when you're ready, of course, your middle finger and your thumb reaches over. It picks up on this gap over here from the center, it cuts directly back to the aces, and then you have everything back together, okay? So you have the 4 aces back on the bottom of the deck, okay? But because this is actually just canceling out a cut, what this means is that if you actually have a riffle shuffle and you do a false riffle shuffle that conserves the top stock, you can also do this to sort of keep track of the top stock as well, right? Because it's just to cancel out the cut, right? Or you can also do a full stock sort of retention for the riffle shuffle, and then of course you can do the same exact thing for the move. So over here, cut, and then of course you can just do this, and then that keeps track of everything, okay? So realistically, you don't only have to preserve the bottom stock for this one. You can do a full deck false shuffle, or you can do a top stock retention, and they'll keep the order the exact same way. Okay. The only reason why it only keeps the only reason why for the bottom for the first 2 methods didn't work is because it actually took place mid overhand shuffle, right? It took place mid overhand shuffle, and of course for an overhand shuffle you sort of need to sort the cards one by one. So of course you're basically just going to be shuffling off the top stock already. So it's why the first 2 methods can only preserve the bottom stock, whereas with the riffle shuffle method, you can, depending on your riffle shuffle, preserve the top stock, bottom stock, or the full deck. All right. So that's the only difference, and of course it all hinges on what you do for your riffle shuffle, because this only concerns where you cut. Okay, so that is method 3 to indicate the location for the cut. So let's go over method 4. This is by far the simplest method, and again, it's supposed to take place after a riffle shuffle. So depending on the riffle shuffle that you use, it can either be used to conserve the bottom stock, the top stock, or the full deck. Okay, so it's very simple. So it's going to be done as you're squaring up the deck, and both hands are still going to be caging the deck. Okay, so for example, if I have the 4 aces on top of the deck over here, right, I'm just going to do a quick top stock retention over here. As I'm actually pushing both packets in together, my left index is actually going to extend, and the pad of my left index is going to contact around the center or just the top card, doesn't really matter. So as I'm squaring up all the packets, both packets together, my left index is actually just going to slide this card towards the right hand side like so, and it's just going to be just sort of extending it from pure friction. Okay, so it's just going to jut out from the right hand side like so. But because my right hand is already just sort of caging the deck, it's actually going to hide the in-jaw card over here, right? So it's actually just going to jut out like so. But of course it's hidden underneath the right hand side. It's very obvious because I'm using a bordered deck, but if you're using something like a B deck, you won't see this discrepancy over here. Okay, so you have this card just sticking out from the right hand side like so. Next, your left hand is actually going to take the bottom packet, and then it's just going to cut on top of the packet already it's just gonna do an undercut over here, right? So it's actually just gonna do a undercut. Undercut cuts on top of the in jog, but because of my right hand, you won't see this in jog over here. And now your right hand can actually just set this packet off this side, and much like with the side jog, if I just bevel this packet backwards, it'll hide that in jog over here, right? But realistically, it's still there, right? It's just that the top few cards are being beveled backwards, so then it hides this side jog over here, right? So it's just gonna go do something like this, right? Next, when you're ready, you're actually just gonna take the deck, place it back in front of you, square up the top like so, but of course the in jog is still there. So when you're ready, your ring finger is actually just gonna curl in. Your right ring finger is gonna curl in, and it's gonna contact around of the top of the right hand corner over here. So it's gonna contact over here, and it's actually just gonna push in this card. But look at what happens when I push in with my ring finger around the top right corner of this in jog card, right? If I actually push this card in, now it actually kicks out towards me. So you actually see the slightest in jog over here. I'm actually just gonna exaggerate it over here. So it actually just kicks out towards here. So now the left hand bottom corner is actually gonna stick out towards me. So when you're ready, your thumb is actually gonna push down on this jog card. And what this does is that this actually just bends this packet upwards, right? It bends everything from the jog upwards into, it basically just kicks it up, right? So it basically just kicks it up like so. And then your left thumb is actually gonna kick this side jog card inwards, and this actually forms a thumb break from everything that is above of the side jog, like so, okay? And now, when you're ready, you can just lift up on this packet, cut forward, and then everything will be restored back to order. So then you have your 4 aces back on top of the deck. Okay, so this is by far the simplest method because you're just using your left index to kick this card off to the side, undercutting, placing off to the side, squaring everything up. You have your in jog over here, kicking this card backwards, pushing down the in jog, turning this into a thumb break like so, and then cutting forward, and of course all your cards are intact. So that is method 4 to indicate the location of the cut. So what these methods are basically just different methods of marking the position of the deck. You already know a very simple one, and that is the break. The break is actually just a very simple concept to mark the position of a deck, you know? And so if I were to name sort of various resources sort of covering different concepts that allow you to mark the position of a different deck, there would be too many, and they're also scattered basically all around of Magic history, because to mark the position of a deck, you can do something as simple as like putting like a grain of salt in between the packets, for example. Or it can have concepts like the jog, like I mentioned throughout the video, things like things like crimps, and so there's too many concepts. So earlier on, I actually introduced a video called sort of describing all of these different concepts. So it's basically a compilation, an introduction, sort of highlighting each of these different methods. But the main thing that I want to highlight was that in the comments down in that video, I also put a whole bunch of resources, and they're sort of already separated into different sections. So if I know this is a shameless plug, but if you guys want to sort of research different methods of marking the position in the deck, whether that be breaks, whether that be jogs, whether that be crimps, please do keep in mind that that video is available. And so it doesn't only include just these concepts, they also include very, very interesting concepts, like maybe like sun bleaching a card, so then you can tell that there's a faint little difference between that specific card, so then you have a key card. So again, there's a whole bunch of different concepts in that video, and they're very, very just briefly mentioned in that video, but it does serve as a good starting point for, you know, if you want to research these different concepts of marking a position in the deck. So then you're not only just limited to breaks, jogs, and crimps and all of that stuff. So of course that video is going to be in the info card over there. You don't have to watch the complete video. You don't even need to, like, you can just skim through it. I don't really care. Or you can just, again, look in the comments down below and then just see all of the different sort of resources that I provided. I actually highly recommend they actually look through all the resources because, again, my video is just as an introduction. It's not meant to be this be-all guide. So again, do support the resources that I provide, and, you know, just purchase some magic books and feel free to research everything in that video, because jogs, crimps, and all of that stuff, they're just barely scratching the surface when it comes to marking the position of the deck. So please do make sure to thoroughly conduct your own research. And yeah, because books will forever sort of describe these concepts better than I ever can. So what we've just gone through was basically an entire chapter in the Expert at the Card Table. It's, in my opinion, the simplest but also the most overlooked section in the book. Most people would actually go for sort of the more technical things, like maybe the bottom deal, right? The Erdnase grip, for example. Or maybe some of the more difficult moves like the SWE shift, or maybe the open shift as a whole. So there's obviously all of these different technical moves in Erdnase, but realistically, there's so many more better things out there than to research these moves. Not to say that you wouldn't get anything out of sort of learning and researching these different types of moves, because you do, right? You actively learn different things from researching moves, even though you don't really use them on a day-to-day basis. But if we're talking about practicality, there's no better thing to look at than something as simple as just having a jog or a crimp, because it's small things like this that have the most amount of value in a book like this. It's nothing big, and it's nothing mechanical, but if there's any tool that you'll use on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be a discrete one like this one, where you can just shuffle off the deck, mark the position, and then when you're ready, you can come back, cut to your desired location, and then that's it, right? It's things that, you know, you can't really achieve with an SWE shift, with false deals, even though they're very satisfying to learn and sort of practice and all that stuff. If there's any tool that you will use, it's gonna be something simple like this. And so yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. It's, again, nothing very mechanically satisfying, nothing mechanically interesting, but I definitely do love these types of chapters. I definitely love these types of mechanics because these are the ones that people overlook the most. And honestly, they're quite satisfying to sort of research about, because it's like, yeah, it's so simple, but it's also just sort of what you need sometimes, you know? It's like, it's nothing difficult, it's nothing satisfying, but it's also something that you will use if you need to, right? And so yeah, I think that about wraps it up for here today. And again, it's just I'm constantly in pursuit of just simple mechanics and stuff like that, or just mechanics in general, because no matter how something may be simple or difficult, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, as long as you find a use for it, as long as it's the most simplest way to get to a desired effect, for me at least, right? So, if, for example, the bottom palm might be difficult, but it honestly simplifies a lot of effects for me. So even though something might be difficult or inherently easier, it doesn't really matter. As long as I'm able to achieve the desired effect, I'm completely fine with using whichever method. So really, don't let the methods sort of dictate what you learn. Let the sort of just learn everything. At this point, I'm just rambling, but yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you guys next time. Continue learning whichever that you like, no matter whether it's simple, whether it's difficult. Everything is basically worth learning as long as you find sort of, something to research about. And so, yeah, take care.